Okay, I'm here with the king himself, Mr. Jarred Correia, and we are pleased to be back with him again. Always
Yeah.
have we've had a couple of great conversations, and so today I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit on first AI. We've talked about it a little bit before. I think maybe like 6-9 months ago, and it's just the changes have been coming so quickly that, I think almost like on a daily basis, I'm seeing something new that I'm implementing in my own work and things like that.
Yeah.
And so it seems to be everywhere. And what I've noticed from my point of view is that there's been a lot of kind of add-ons, superficial add-ons that are not really super impactful. You've probably seen it like in your, in certain software and in different things like that. What do you think just kind of generally has changed over the past year with how like lawyers understand AI or how they're using it? Just kind of broadly speaking, in those terms.
Yeah. It's been an interesting year, man. I'll tell you that. I found that so I do a ton of presentations, as you know, and I probably do 200 a year, which is ridiculous. But
Same.
I have found that 70% of what I talk about now is AI. Like it's all anybody wants to talk about. But I think the two things that are interesting is not a lot of lawyers, especially like small firm lawyers, are actually using it. Everybody wants to talk about it. Everybody has strong opinions about it. But then I get in a room. I did a presentation on AI for like 1,000 attorneys the other day. And I'm like, who's used AI? And like 4 hands go up. People aren't even using like ChatGPT or like Google Gemini or something like that, which is crazy to me. So I think the biggest thing that I've noticed in the last year is like lawyers have to be more willing to like actually try this out and test it on their own. Because I think there's a lot of talk and not a lot of action. And then the other thing was kind of what you mentioned, which is like everybody's got an AI tool now, right? They're like, oh, we got our new AI system, come buy in. But a lot of it is trash. And a lot of it is just like super basic functionality. That's not to say everybody. Like there are some companies in the space that are doing like really interesting things with AI. Like, Thomson Reuters acquired CoCounsel, which was built by Casetext. That's a good product. Filevine, the case management software company, they're releasing a lot of like deep AI tools. They got a deposition tool that came out at their conference last month that's really good. Spellbook has this AI associate that they just released. So people are doing some deep stuff, but a lot of it is just like, hey, we'll summarize your data for you. And the only pitch there is like, oh, we're ostensibly this legal company that's going to protect your data better than ChatGPT. But and I think I don't have a problem with that necessarily. I'm glad people are utilizing these tools, but I think it's really early days, and I am looking for more sophisticated use cases out of legal. So I guess spinning that all back together, what I'm saying is like lawyers aren't experimenting with AI as much as they could. But also there are a lot of simple tools where it's like you reach the end of that functionality pretty quick.
Yeah. Well, it seemed like, ChatGPT, it was just like, once that first came out, it was like a bomb and it just like everybody was aware of it, kind of knew about it. But then, and I was aware of it too, but I didn't really jump into it at first, because I was just thinking, okay, this is so new. I don't really see like a clear cut application. And then once I started actually playing around with it, it took me a little while, and to kind of just figure out what it was, figure out like with just ChatGPT, right? What I noticed when I started utilizing it was that I didn't know how to use it. I would plug stuff into the thing, the ChatGPT, and I would get back maybe like a bad result, right? I would say something like, write me an article, and then the article comes back and it's kind of trash, and you're like, okay, well, I guess AI is not for me, sort of thing. But the more I think, and I'm guessing this is where a lot of lawyers are, is that they've like maybe tried it once, kind of anecdotally, or they see like the summary thing inside like their email, and it doesn't really do a good job or something, and they're like, okay, well, if this is AI, like I don't really, I'm not really going to invest time or energy into it. But I'm I'm hopeful they will. Or I mean, it's up to them. But like for me personally, once you kind of get going, there's just so many kind of creative utilizations for it as far as building it into your workflow that I think, I have to see there's a lot of applications for it with a lot of the like mundane stuff that, lawyers are forced to do, whether it's like reading, writing, just stuff that you're either giving to an assistant, giving to a paralegal is going to ultimately, be able to be, you can build a workflow around it essentially.
Yeah, I think it's a long game, and it's going to improve. And this is like the very earliest stages of consumers actually engaging with AI in a meaningful way. And it kind of had to be the chatbot because it's a totally different experience to converse with a technology for most people than to be like, I'm making a search and I'm getting an output from it.
Yeah.
So I think you're making a lot of good points there. And I think if I'm a lawyer, so in most states, they've updated the ethics rules at this point to include either comment 6 or comment 8 to rule 1.1, which basically says an attorney, to be competent, you need to understand the technology and stay abreast of technology developments. And I think that last part becomes really important because the AI is going to get a whole lot better. And what you don't want to do is say, well, this is not great right now, so I'm done forever. Because AI is not going away. So you need to understand how it works now, and then you need to follow the developments. And I would be like, if I was an attorney, I would be really aggressive about utilizing this because you can remove a lot of the rote work that you do and your staff does using an AI tool.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to be this way forever. Like, I don't know that we need to talk about this today, but I think AI is coming for people's jobs for sure. But
100%.
right now it's an assistive technology. And if it can get you 80% of the way there, then that's a time saver. And if the expectation is the output is going to be perfect, that's the wrong expectation.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And so, kind of, you answered the next point or question I was going to make is basically just talk about the opportunity, for lawyers, because I kind of liken this to this right around the beginning of the internet itself. And it's extremely powerful, but it's in its infancy. I can tell you personally, when we actually took it seriously and adopted this, we were able to reduce labor by about $10,000 per month. So just in our business. And so I think what do you think about, kind of those type of opportunities? I mean, you already kind of touched on it as far as coming for jobs, but what do you see are like some of the practical kind of entry points where what's going to become commonplace for, the solo small attorney who's, maybe not utilizing it right now?
Yeah, I think the coming for jobs things is a way off. Like, I don't know, like the technology is increasing at such a rapid pace. Like, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm hoping we have like a decade or two left before we all have to start living in caves or whatever. I think the opportunity is massive in terms of cost savings. Let me talk about two things. Like, the first thing is, like, if you think about the tasks that a lawyer does on a daily basis, and even the tasks that staff do in a somewhat technology forward law firm, but not completely. Like, there's a million different things that you could do with AI. You can use it as a starting point for drafting content. You can use it as a way to write correspondence to clients, get a first draft in place, right? You can use it to summarize case law, or you can use it to develop a strategy in a particular case. There's probably like 27, 30 different workflows you could think of off the top of your head. And the idea for me is that, okay, if I've got this time that's being spent on this project and I can reduce that time by 80%, 70% using AI, there's cost savings there. And not just cost savings over your current team. There's a notion moving forward that if you are in a position where you can use AI for certain tasks and not people, your staff load is going to be smaller, which means you're saving costs that way as well. So you said you saved 10K in your business when you started using AI? Like,
per month.
I think that's like probably a low number for a lot of law firms, honestly. because a lot like every lawyer thinks they're like a special snowflake, right? And we do things the way that like we have a special way of doing it. Like no one else runs a personal injury law firm like we do. But
Right.
guess what? Everybody runs their firm kind of the same way. And if you utilize AI, you can save a bunch of time. I guess that, moving forward, the interesting thing for me is that this technology is going to get more and more sophisticated. And if we're talking about shaving time off, like that's going to become incremental. So
Yeah.
maybe it's 70% now, but it's 75% 2 years from now. And it's 85% 3 years from now. And maybe at some point you eliminate an entire set of tasks that people don't have to do anymore. But to the earlier conversation we were having, I think that only occurs when you're in a position where you're starting to use the technology right now and you ramp it up over time rather than trying to adopt it and ramp it up right away. I think AI is going to be the most transformative technology, full stop, like ever, not just for law firms. And then the last thing I would compare it to that had this much of an effect in terms of change in the law practice would be the cloud, but it doesn't even compare. Like cloud services, like they allow people to work remotely. They allow you to swap data between software systems far more easily than you could previously. Like that was transformative. And especially when the pandemic hit, like it allowed people to work from home. But AI is going to have like 100, 1,000, 2,000 times the impact that the cloud would have for law firms. Now, the other thing I want to talk about briefly is like one of the problems with AI that lawyers bring up to me regularly is like, okay, I bill hourly. AI makes me work faster. I don't make as much money. And so there's two solutions to that. The first is now you have more work volume, right? I talk to lawyers about work volume all the time. So if without AI, you can have 20 cases that you can prosecute, with AI, maybe your caseload goes up to 30 or 40. And in certain practice areas, that's really advantageous. Like if you're billing hourly, okay, yeah, you're going to be making the same amount of money in theory. But if you're a personal injury attorney, like you get more bites at the apple. You're basically scratching more lottery tickets, which is over the course of time going to increase your revenue. But even if you're an attorney who bills hourly, like this is the time to start thinking about how can you use this technology to benefit me? And one of the ways you could do that is to potentially look at charging flat fees or alternative billing models. The attorneys I work with who are flat fee attorneys, they make like 15 to 30% more than they would on hourly billing, like across the board, because you're billing for time and value. So a lot of times when attorneys think there's this barrier to using AI, it's actually advantageous to them if they view it in the right way.
Yeah. No, I think everything you're saying makes a ton of sense. And I really like the point about just it being assistive in nature at this point, because I think the biggest thing with maybe, utilizing this the right way is just perspective and mindset with it, because if you're going in, and I think the items that get cited the most in the news are like, oh, this attorney was caught using AI and it made up cases, right?
Oh, yeah.
Something like that. And that,
should we talk about hallucinations or no?
I mean, I don't know, maybe like, basically I think just it can be kind of remedied or, solved in everybody's mind by just like understanding that it's not foolproof, right? And it's not going to, completely write the brief for you. It's not going to completely do the thing, but it can get you 80% there. And, and so there's, at least right now, there's still that, that manual kind of overview of knowing whether or not it passes your standards. But the other point, in addition to, saving time, saving money, is I would say one of the biggest benefits I've seen is just confidence level in the output, right? The product, the work product. And, just one of the ways that we utilize it is, we were getting work done by basically assistants. It was then flowing up to a, manager who would review the work. And we're on kind of this tight month, 30-day schedule where we have to have the deliverables and send them out to the clients. And so what would happen is we would get, 15, 20 days in, they would send the work up and the manager's like, this is not anything like what I wanted, right? It's so different. And so it would go back down, and then we're stuck into this cycle of, okay, we're doing, August work in, September, and so on and so on. So like, because we wanted a good, good product to go out. And so our overdue, tasks have just plummeted substantially, because we now can, basically ensure with the AI that the work product meets rigid protocols or standards, right? And so I think you can apply that with, the kind of some of the applications I see, or, no matter what you're doing, it's it's somewhat of a formulaic process, right? If you're doing these applications, if you're doing, motions, if you're doing, something that you can go and get every single motion you've ever created for some specific thing, load it in there. And I mean, it's going to take a little tweaking, and, and so I think, to your point, the people who kind of invest now and get acquainted with it now are going to really, be able to leverage this in a big way moving forward. You can put your next motion in, it'll essentially write it for you, knowing all of the characteristics, the traits, to kind of match that, like, special way that you do it. So I think, at least for me, that's been a huge, I don't know, it gives me peace of mind, makes me, even happier with the product we're giving out, fewer headaches.
I love that. That's a great way to look at it. Can I throw you a curveball? I know this is your show,
Always.
But like,
yeah. I mean,
this is like right in your wheelhouse, I think, and it's AI related. So what's interesting to me is that Google recently came out with a core update, which is now rolled out in August.
Yeah.
Really content focused.
Yep.
Google's also got AI search results now at the top of search, which is crazy. And if you roll through that and you click on that, each of the links is to a piece of content. And I've been experimenting with this. I've been searching for topics that law firms would write about, and law firm content is at the top of the page. So one of the things that's interesting to me is there's a little bit of a push and pull here, because a lot of lawyers I talk to, they're like, oh, AI is great. I can start drafting content for my website using AI. But all the push that Google is making is like, hey, we want like high quality content in these areas that is useful for legal consumers or consumers in general. So what I find interesting is, like, if people are telling me like, oh, I'm just going to crank out like 1 billion blog posts using ChatGPT, that can't be the right strategy. I feel like that, like, to the point we were making before, that's the assistive part. And then you really got to flesh that out and make that high quality. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I'm interested in you as a marketing person. Like, how do you thread that needle? Because by one point, Google's like, let's use AI for everything. But then they're like, oh, we need high quality content that AI is not going to necessarily produce without the right prompting on its own.
Yeah. So I would say over time, Google's kind of always progressively tried to, improve their results, or like, build their results in a way where it relies on, mathematical or algorithmic criteria, right? And so, prior to this, let's go back 10, 20 years, and it was like, okay, we're going to use link building, right? Or we're going to use keyword frequency. So just the number of times that you put, criminal lawyer San Diego in, and you could put it in white and do it 800 times, and, you would go up, right? And so they have kind of these imperfect measurements, or like signals that, they use to kind of understand if, in fact, this is quality, right? And so I think the thing that people get often wrong is, I still hear people are like, well, I know you're the marketing guy, you're going to go put the right keywords in, and like, and that's a part of it. But I think you'll see moving forward that, they're looking more holistically at the business, basically things that you can't kind of fake by one signal, right? And so one signal for me would be like, starting a website up, writing 1,000 articles. Like we've done stuff like that to test it, not necessarily in legal, but, and what happens is, if you don't have Facebook presence, if you don't have, these other things that kind of give you the trappings of a real, business, right? Someone that, basically authentication from multiple angles, right? If you don't have that, then it's, you're basically going to get quieted, right? You're not going to get that pop. Now there are examples where, people can, kind of avoid that, or like, they've done that and they get really good traffic, and, they basically ended the kind of affiliate SEO market.
Yeah, right.
During that update. So I think at some point, or I think where it's going to go is like, and where we're kind of thinking about it is, what are those elements that can't easily be done by everybody else? So what's the like competitive moat, right? And so, you've seen part of that with, people putting like this article written by Bob Jones, JD, and then you link to the bio. And so you're having these like eat signals and stuff like that. And so I've heard, basically, part of maybe what they're looking for is like, content or things that don't appear anywhere else on the internet. So like first person material, right? And things like that haven't, that they can't reference somewhere else. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answer, at this point. I think it's like, I don't think,
I don't think anybody does, by the way.
Well, I don't think Google's figured it out either, because if they answer every question and, it's how they can't serve ads, and so it's like, that's their, I would say, biggest cash cow. So it's, I think they're going to have to find a balance between those things.
Right.
So I don't, we'll see how it goes. So, all right. So last question on the AI side.
Yes.
What do you think, you mentioned some of these things already. What do you think are 1, 2 of kind of the, lowest energy, highest reward things that average lawyer can do right now with AI? Like what are a couple of, just kind of clear cut applications for like, the solo or, small law firm that's not, not using like the real heavy AI deposition software, or,
who hasn't like bought into something. Yeah. So if you're using like the free tools, let's start there.
Yeah.
So probably like there's some discussion about this, but I'd probably avoid like confidential data going into those tools at this point, if I'm using like free chat GPT or something like that. So one use case I see a lot is workflow building, which I love. I talk to a lot of, I'm a big process guy. I'm a big data person. So, and data starts with processes, in my opinion. So to run a profitable law firm, you have to think about process metrics and how you utilize those. Not everybody does. So you have to have a process in place to start with. So if you tell an AI tool, hey, build me an intake process for my law firm, and then you fill that out with some detail. Like, I'm a personal injury law firm in Atlanta, Georgia, and we've been operating for 20 years, and we specialize in trucking accidents, right? Have it build that out for you. Now, that's not going to be perfect, like we talked about before, because this is an assistive technology. You're going to get maybe 80% of the way there. But I find that a lot of lawyers have trouble like building that out, because that's not their natural skill set. There could be any sort of administrative workflow that you could put in there. And it could even be case workflows, because if you're like, hey, I'm prosecuting this type of case, what should my workflow be? What should my process be? Because you're not saying I'm processing this particular case for John Doe and here's the fact set. So you could do that too. You could do a closing workflow for cases. You could say, hey, I got an Epson 247 laser printer in my office. What's my process for putting new toner in? And you can find that too. Like, that's a great That's a great use case, workflows. The other,
just if I can interrupt for one second, I was going to say, it's very, I like that, because it's really flexible, and it's not like, oh, you need to just be doing, drafting of documents or something like that. And so I find, now anything that, kind of requires, or I get to the point, where I don't immediately have, kind of the idea of like what I need to do for the next set of steps. Right. And so I would say like something that I think super, I think the intake example is extremely good because, you kind of know you need a system, or maybe it's emails to people once they've signed up, right? Or they're thinking about using your services. Like,
Right.
you may not be a great copywriter or like know exactly what to say. That's the perfect time to just go to Chat GPT and say, give it a little context, tell it, look, I'm like you said, criminal lawyer, et cetera, your details. I want to write a 3 email sequence for people who are thinking about our services. We've been in business for this long. You're kind of just basically giving it like you would give the task to a person, right? And then it'll come back and like, there's going to be some things you don't like, but that's where you can, like you said, it gets you 80% there. And you can do that with anything, anything that is, process related. So carry on.
The idea of building out a drip campaign, I think, is a really smart maneuver there as well. And so you can get as deep as you want into this. Like I was talking about, just like build the workflow, show me the steps. But if you're like, build me a communication set underneath this part of the workflow, you could absolutely do that as well. And we're talking about like Chat GPT and tools like that right now. There are a lot of like workflow management, project management tools like Notion or Taskade or Trello that are implementing AI. And that's the system is built to generate task flows, but it was previously built to generate those manually. So now you can use the AI. And the other segment of this is interesting to me is like not just creating workflows from scratch. AI is really good at like, I've done these 7 things. What's my next best action? And you can get an answer for that too. All right, second use case. I think AI is really good for summarizing things.
Yeah.
So if I have a case that I find and I'm like, I need to put this into a paragraph form for a legal brief I'm writing. You input the case, you say, summarize it. AI is great for that. You could tell AI, I went to law school and yet I still don't understand the rule against perpetuities. Plop that into Chat GPT. And then it's all about prompting, right? And we've talked a little bit about this. So you could say, explain the rule against perpetuities to me like I'm a 5-year-old using blocks. And AI will do that for you. Another related issue on that is I've had people use the AI to sort of be like, here's a legal concept. I'm writing it down like a lawyer. Can you draft this in a way that I could use to explain it to a non-lawyer client of mine in this practice area?
To a dumb judge.
Like, like that kind of thing. So like, that type of use case is tremendous. And what's great about the AI tools is that you can say, act like this, or write for this person, or use this tone, which is something like, if you're not, like we talked about before, if you're an attorney, you should be using this stuff now so you could get more sophisticated with it, so that as the technology becomes more sophisticated itself, you can keep up with it. And one of the ways you can get sophisticated with this right now is to say, hey, explain this concept to a client of mine. Here's that client avatar. Explain it in this way at this education level. And that's tremendously helpful if you're trying to close a client, if you have an existing client that you want to explain a concept to that you're having trouble getting through with. Like that kind of stuff is really helpful. So we already talked about the deposition stuff. Maybe you're using a paid software for that, but like AI is great for summaries. So use it for that purpose.
Yeah. And the last point I'll kind of put a button on this portion is that a phrase? Put a button on it?
It is now. It'll be on Urban Dictionary in a couple weeks.
We'll see. I don't know if I have that poll, but put a bow on it, I guess, is the better one. All that I think works. And then I think just something I've seen from my dad's practice, they're like often changing out receptionist assistants. Anybody who's kind of any good seems to get plucked by bigger firms and stuff like that. And so I think, instead of just kind of dumping like the kind of sales or follow up on your, on your assistant, expecting them to be great at it when they have no formal training, you don't even really know what the right path is. You're just kind of asking them to figure it out. That perfect implementation of going to ChatGPT and asking what should I do, right? Somebody has reached out, they're uncommitted. What should I do? and it'll tell you like, oh, maybe call once, maybe email, the day of, and then, and follow through. And so I like all of that because it can provide this layer of like education and standardization that you may not, unless you're a really good leader and have, and process oriented, you may not have that. And I think it just ultimately makes a better product coming out of your firm, and a more, consistent product is what I've found and what I really like. So, cool. All right. I'll close that there.
Can I just say one more thing briefly?
I mean, why not?
This is important for what you were saying, which is we've been talking about lawyers using AI, right?
Yeah.
Like, what about staff and the team, associates,
such a no-brainer.
admin? And so what I would say with that is that like, you don't necessarily want people using AI willy-nilly, like however they want to. And so two things. One, I would say is it becomes even more important that your staff has a sense of, okay, what is confidential data and what is not. And then the other thing is I would probably enact an AI usage policy in my law firm if I'm using AI at all. And there are templates available for that. So
you don't need a template. Just go to ChatGPT and say, I want to make a policy.
There you go. Perfect.
So I would just encourage everybody, out there who's interested in AI to just get a ChatGPT account and just play around, right? And just start, kind of jotting down on a piece of paper, repetitive things you do, or anything that, just immediately you don't have, a kind of a plan for in your mind, and just play around with it and see what, kind of where it gets you. So really appreciate all that discussion. And now I'm going to transition to kind of end of the year, some of the things that lawyers can be doing towards the end of the year and into the first part of the next year to prepare, basically get off on the best foot. I kind of have seen this, this situation play out where lawyers are like super busy between now and kind of the end of the year, closing out important matters, trying to close cases, different stuff. And they basically go into hibernation starting in Thanksgiving is what I've noticed, which I don't mind because then December's a little quiet.
You get to go into hibernation too.
Right before, Bloody Sunday in January, when they're like, oh, wait, what did I spend all my money on this year? And, they want to chop marketing out. But so what are a couple things that, you kind of advise at this time of the year, whether it's like as part of kind of the end of the year process or just planning for something in like January that they should, run with, or sprint towards.
I hate this whole notion of like, let's hibernate for the end of the year, because that's a great time to be planning for 2025 in this instance. So two things I would say, like if you're a law firm right now and you're thinking of doing the big sleep from Thanksgiving until January 1, I would be looking at, so first thing I would do, I would review like budget to actual over the course of the last year. And maybe that is from January 1 to December 1, because everybody projects things, but nobody goes back and looks and says, was I correct in what I was projecting? Yeah. You may be largely correct, but everybody misses things, and projections are always educated guesses. So that's the first thing I would do. And if that's something that you're uncomfortable doing on your own, and you have an accountant that you work with, ask the accountant to do it for you as well. So
you're mostly talking about like financial projections, right? Just basically, we expect it to make this amount
I'm not
of money.
talking about that yet, just budget for now. But that's the next thing I want to talk about. So the first thing I would look at is like budget to actual. Like what did we say we were going to pay out in terms of costs, and what did we actually pay out? And then the second thing is, to your point, I'm spending time building revenue projections for 2025, which is a highly beneficial activity that most attorneys don't engage in. And I'm also looking at like, if I did revenue projections last year, how close was I? Did I hit my expectations? Was I wrong on certain things? The reason I like law firms doing revenue projections is that it forces them to do other things. So to be able to make projections about what you're going to do in the new year, you have to have a rate sheet. So you need to know what you charge or what you're going to make on specific cases. You have to build a marketing plan, because if you try to make more money, get more clients, you have to know how you're going to do that. You may have to develop metrics to incentivize people to make more money by bringing in more clients to get them to do what they need to do. And sometimes
Yeah.
that's just like, hey, maybe we need a new workflow so that we can process our cases faster. So this whole notion of figuring out, like, if I'm going to make 20% more in 2025, how does that functionally happen? That has this massive cascading effect about all the things you should be doing in your law firm. So
Yeah.
those are two of the activities I would be focusing on in November, December, if it were me and I was running a practice.
Yeah. How much time do you think, like, would you allocate to, like an activity like that, just in terms of, creating a forecast? Because I feel like, in my head, when I hear that, I'm like, okay, well, where would I even start? And I mean, I kind of know, I know now, because I've gone through it with, accountants and, people like who love that stuff and specialize in it. But like, what's a, kind of like practical amount of time that you would suggest doing that? Or, how would you go about that with an accountant, just kind of get the ball rolling, or at least knock out, kind of one of those.
I like people to own the process. So I don't think this is like you hand it over to the accountant. It's like, all right, whatever you say, buddy. I checked off this thing on my list. I did it. I might even do, if you've never done it before, I might do a first draft on my own. And if it's not something you do in your practice regularly, I might take a retreat day, right? So I might consider like getting an Airbnb for myself on a Saturday, just hanging out there in the hammock and just working it out. And like having like heavy focus time. So this is not, I'm going to work on my revenue projections while simultaneously watching something on Netflix or simultaneously responding to emails. Like really think about it and spend some time on it. And I would probably take a day to do it. And even if you're not figuring out what other ramifications spin off of that immediately, like you are getting the revenue projections down. And then you're starting to think about, okay, what other things do I need to accomplish to actually make this happen? And then you can figure out those other things later. That's perfectly fine.
That makes sense. Okay. I think that's really helpful. And what is once you kind of get that squared away, is there anything else that you would kind of you'd want to tackle as you go into 2025? Maybe even just general, maybe even less process oriented, and kind of continuing with our, a little bit of the kind of AI discussion we had previously, which, is like, what maybe are, what's a big trend that you kind of see? I mean, I think AI is a big one. So, I mean, would you say like, yeah, I advise all my clients to, spend 1 hour a month kind of getting to know AI and like playing around with it, trying to figure things, some ways they can implement it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So like, I generally don't do that in terms of like, I don't have like a program that I run out for everybody per se. Like I'm very much into like trying to take clients where they are and being like, okay, what are your needs for this year? And like in terms of this topic, like I don't even think we need to go back to AI. Like the thing I would be thinking about is, do I have any goals or metrics in the firm that I'm using aside from like just base revenue? Like everybody wants to make more money. And if I talk to a lawyer and they're like, I'm like, what's your goal? They're like, I want to make more money. I'm like, well, tell me something I don't know. Shock. You want to make more money out of your business? Wow. What an insightful way to address this. But I'm talking about like specific goals. So like, do you have other goals for the firm that can relate back to revenue? And do individuals have goals for the firm as well?
Yeah.
So this could be, okay, we've done our revenue projections. We want to get 5 more clients from our website each year. Okay, so what do we need to do to make that happen? Do we need to change our website in some way? What are the functional things we're going to do for that? So that's potentially a goal. Okay, we want to increase our revenue by increasing our case volume. So what do we need to do to make us, to allow us to move through cases faster?
Yeah.
Do we need to get through the disbursement phase quicker if we're a personal injury firm? Do we need to get somebody from a signing meeting to a design meeting faster if we're a estate planning firm? How do we do that? And then who owns that process? Like, is that me, the attorney, who's moving that ball forward? Do I have somebody who's a paralegal in the firm, who's a case mover, who's going to do that for me? And are we tracking that information? Who's responsible for tracking the information? Who's responsible for reporting on it? Like that's the kind of thing I would focus on. Creating universal KPIs for the firm and individual KPIs, because I've seen this too. Like you can't have firm KPIs and also no KPIs for individuals, because what happens is like everybody's like, oh yeah, we had to do that, but I don't think that was my job because it was never assigned to me. And if nobody's assigned a job, it doesn't become everybody's job, which is what a lot of people think. It becomes nobody's job. So I'm a big believer in like firm-wide KPIs, individual KPIs.
Yeah.
If you don't like the term KPIs, call them metrics. But that's the other thing I would be developing once I've done the revenue projections, once I have a budget, once I have a sense of what my profit's going to be that year, once I look at accounts receivable, like let me get the financial stuff done, and then let me put some goals on top of that, like actual discrete goals to move forward.
Yeah. And I think one thing I would just tack on top of that is once you have an idea of what those are, or a couple that you want to look at, go ahead and put a recurring calendar event on your calendar, right?
Yes.
And so even when we have it on a calendar, it's still a challenge because maybe we're putting, kind of like putting out a fire, or like, something else kind of demands the attention. And so it's, it's so easy to set those and then forget them, if you don't have that kind of locked in time where you're forced to with it.
Yeah, it's a discipline question for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Very helpful. Do you have 60 to 90 seconds for a lightning round, since you gave me a fun one when I was on your show?
Right.
So
I love lightning rounds. Hit me up.
Okay, so we're now entering the lightning round portion of the podcast with Mr. Jarred Correia. So, all right, number one, hard hitter right out of the gate. Who is the bigger legal influencer, Kim Kardashian or Jarred Correia?
Oh, me, clearly. Legal? Yeah. Have I told you about my fragrance? No, I don't have a fragrance.
That'd be cool. She's doing a lot of like, well, I don't know much, but she's getting into jails. She's I
had no idea.
Really?
Oh, if Kim Kardashian is actually doing something in the legal space, then she's absolutely more influential than I am already.
No, she's actually like getting she's been a big advocate for like prison reform and stuff like that. Check it out.
All right, so I amend my prior answer.
It's a good redeeming quality for her. So
good.
Okay, what practice area is the biggest pain to deal with?
Oh, from a consulting side?
Yeah.
That's a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. I'm gonna say immigration.
Interesting.
Because it's really complex. There's an absurd amount of forms, and sometimes there's language barriers with clients. Sometimes there's cultural barriers with clients. And there are a lot of ethics complaints in that space. That is a really tough practice area to be in. So, and there are a lot of people who are very successful at it. And simultaneously, it's like a really tough area to consult in. But I enjoy it. I like a challenge.
Interesting. Okay, I go PI. I would say PI.
All right, that's fair.
Like they're all like riverboat gamblers, and like want to pay like $50,000 and get like $2 million in payouts. So
that is true.
Okay, who's worse, legal marketers or legal consultants?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I'm gonna say legal consultants. I'm gonna throw myself in the boat here. I just hate I'm not a fan of like the Tony Robbins style of stuff, and I don't like mindset, like everybody's over promising. It's just like not in my wheelhouse at all. And I don't like it. Like everybody's got like, how many people are like the 8-figure law firm, the 7-figure law firm? Like to me, as somebody who's been doing this for a long time, my whole posture is like every law firm is different. I said before, lawyers aren't special and the processes aren't necessarily special, but like every lawyer is different. Every managing attorney is different. they have different ideas about how they want their practices to run, what they want to achieve. And this whole notion of like, we get your mindset right and you're going to be a billionaire, like that doesn't actually work for most people. So I like to really dive into like, what are your goals? Let's try to achieve those specific goals and move forward on those. And I'm legal consultants, I would say by far, like legal marketers like yourself. I know a lot of good legal marketers. I would say, especially the legal marketing firms that focus, like marketing firms that focus on law. I generally have really good experience with those folks, but the consultants some of the stuff is just nauseating that goes out online. So
I don't know. I may start a ranch where I help lawyers rehabilitate after other marketing experiences, because that's about 99% of every conversation I have with a new prospect is like, well, let me tell you about how these guys did me dirty. So
maybe we're just telling on ourselves here.
Because
we each picked our own industry.
Yeah. Okay. What's the biggest scam or kind of red herring that lawyers should steer clear of in this next year?
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, so let's go back to the AI thing. Like, if you're getting a pitch and it's like AI is going to solve all your problems, you don't have to work anymore, because that's happening. That's coming down the pipe as well.
Automate your law firm, automate the whole thing.
That's not a thing.
Yeah.
And I've been telling people this for years, which is like, nobody wants to talk about managing their business. Nobody wants to have deep conversations about process management, but it's a non-starter if you don't do that. You got to understand and own your processes. You got to understand and own your technology in a real way. And there is no like gift wrap solution. Like, it's very similar to what I was just talking about, which is like, oh, do these 7 things and you'll make $1 million. Like, that's not how it works. And it's the same thing with like these AI tools. They're not a panacea.
Yeah. Makes sense. All right. Last question. Who's going to win the World Series?
I picked the Rangers last year, believe it or not.
I don't believe you, but go ahead.
It's on a podcast. I picked the Rangers like 3 months before the season ended. It's out there. This year, I am going to say all right. Phillies are breaking through this year.
Okay.
So I'm going to say, yep, Phillies.
Okay. Well, we'll maybe check back in a few months to see if that's accurate, but probably not. So
let's do it. Yeah, it's probably going to be wrong. Don't bet on that, but that's what I think.
Well, all right. I really appreciate your time. I think this was awesome. Really appreciate it. If you happen to be unfamiliar with Jarred, haven't looked him up through the course of this, check out Red Cave Legal. What's that URL for the folks at home?
redcavelegal.com. Pretty easy. So
easy.
Check it out.
Easy stuff. You might see him around at your state's CLEs. Lots of opportunities to see him on video. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. This was a pleasure.
Always.